There are places in Connecticut where the past leaves behind more questions than answers. Ancient stone chambers scattered across the countryside, mysterious carvings whose origins are still debated, and alignments that suggest a knowledge of the stars far older than recorded history. Tonight, we're exploring Connecticut's most puzzling ancient mysteries, evidence that challenges the accepted timeline and hints at a forgotten chapter of human history. Before we begin, here's a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to enjoy the stories. They make the journey more immersive, but you can follow everything through audio alone. So feel free to let this play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these perplexing mysteries. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider subscribing. Now, let's begin our journey into the most enduring enigmas of Connecticut's ancient past. Deep within the woods of Groton, Connecticut, hidden beneath a canopy of trees, lies a puzzle carved from stone. This is Gungywamp, a complex of enigmatic stone structures that has baffled historians, archaeologists, and curious visitors for generations. The centerpiece of this mystery, a series of remarkably precise subterranean stone chambers. Their cool, dark interiors and the uncanny precision of their construction stand in stark contrast to the surrounding New England forest, whispering a persistent question: who built these and why? On the surface, the most accepted explanation seems straightforward. Many mainstream archaeologists point towards colonial settlers. These chambers, they argue, are simply exceptionally well-built root cellars. Root cellars were common features on colonial farms, used to store vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and turnips through the harsh New England winters. The thick stone walls would indeed provide excellent insulation, maintaining a cool, stable temperature year-round. Proponents of this theory note the presence of documented colonial activity in the area and the practicality of the structures for that purpose. It seems logical, almost mundane. But step inside one of these chambers, feel the weight of the massive lintel stones overhead. Observe the intricate corbelling of the walls as they curve inward to form a roof, and the colonial root cellar theory suddenly feels inadequate. The sheer effort involved in quarrying, moving, and precisely fitting these multi-ton stones seems extraordinary for a simple storage space. Colonial root cellars are typically cruder affairs, dug into hillsides or built with simpler stonework. The craftsmanship at Gungywamp speaks of a different level of intention, perhaps even reverence. This is where the mystery truly deepens. Could these chambers be far older? Could they predate European settlement entirely? Some researchers and passionate investigators believe so, pointing to features that defy easy colonial explanation. One of the most compelling is the so-called calendar chamber, or light chamber. This specific structure is meticulously aligned. On the spring and fall equinoxes, as the sun rises, a narrow shaft of sunlight penetrates a small, carefully constructed opening in the chamber wall. For a brief, dramatic moment, this beam of light illuminates a specific, dark recess within the chamber. This precise solar alignment suggests an understanding of astronomy and a deliberate ceremonial or calendrical function. Building a root cellar that tracks the equinoxes seems like an incredible, unnecessary feat for colonial farmers, simply trying to preserve their parsnips. Then there are the double walls. Some chambers feature unusual double-course stone walls, with a narrow gap of air or small stones between the inner and outer layers. While this could theoretically offer extra insulation, its purpose in a root cellar remains unclear and seems overly complex. In contrast, similar double-wall construction is found in ancient Celtic structures in Europe, like souterrains or fagus, often interpreted as ritual spaces or refuges. The resemblance is striking and fuels speculation about transatlantic connections long before Columbus. Adding another layer of intrigue is the presence of possible petroglyphs, carvings on stone. While some markings are likely colonial graffiti, others appear more abstract and ancient. The most famous and controversial is the Gungywamp runestone. Found near the site, it bears markings some claim resemble ancient Norse runes. While the authenticity of this specific stone is heavily debated and often dismissed by academics as a modern hoax or misidentified natural marks, its very discovery near the chambers adds to the aura of ancient mystery surrounding the site. Even without the runestone, the feeling inside the chambers is palpably different. Many visitors report a profound sense of stillness, age, and something beyond the everyday, a feeling that resonates more with ancient sacred sites than agricultural storage. So who might have built them if not colonists? Theories range widely. Some propose they were constructed by pre-colonial Native American cultures, though no definitive evidence links the known tribes of the region to such sophisticated stone chamber construction. Others look across the Atlantic, suggesting possible influence or even construction by pre-Columbian voyagers, perhaps Irish monks like Saint Brendan, Celtic explorers, or even Bronze Age mariners. The solar alignment and double wall construction lend a tantalizing, albeit controversial, credence to these ideas. Could Gungywamp be a fragmentary remnant of a forgotten chapter in American history, evidence of contact lost to time? The debate between the practical root cellar and the potential ancient ceremonial site remains fiercely unresolved. Archaeologists continue to search for definitive clues, datable organic material sealed within the original construction, distinct tool marks, or clear cultural artifacts linked to either the colonial era or a pre-colonial culture. But the stones guard their secrets closely. The colonial explanation, while plausible, struggles to account for the sophistication, the alignments, and the sheer presence of these structures. The ancient ceremonial site theory, while deeply alluring, lacks the smoking gun of concrete proof. Gungywamp persists as an enigma, a tangible reminder that even in the familiar woods of Connecticut, the past might hold profound and unexpected secrets. Were the builders pragmatic colonists expressing unexpected architectural ambition? Or were they representatives of a much older, forgotten tradition, leaving behind silent stone sentinels whose true purpose we can only dimly perceive? The chambers stand, silent and waiting, their mystery echoing in the cool, damp air. Imagine digging in your backyard, turning over the soil for a garden or a foundation, and your shovel strikes something unexpected. Not a rock, but metal. Brushing away the dirt, you see the unmistakable glint of an ancient coin. This isn't just one coin, but dozens, and they look impossibly old. This is essentially what happened in Montville, Connecticut, in the early 1980s, setting the stage for one of the most perplexing numismatic mysteries in North America, the Montville Roman coin hoard. The discovery was startling. Over 200 coins, primarily made of bronze and silver, were unearthed, but these weren't colonial American pennies or Spanish pieces of 8. These coins were ancient, bearing the faded profiles of emperors and the iconography of the Roman Empire. Initial identification sent shockwaves through the small community and beyond. How could coins minted in the Mediterranean world centuries, even millennia, ago end up buried in the soil of New England? The most straightforward explanation, and the one generally favored by mainstream archaeologists and historians, is that this was a relatively modern hoard. They propose the coins were brought over from Europe, likely in the 19th or early 20th century, by an immigrant collector fascinated by antiquities. Perhaps this collector buried them for safekeeping, maybe fearing theft, fire, or economic instability, and then died or moved away without ever retrieving them. Over time, the exact location was forgotten, and the coins lay hidden until the accidental discovery decades later. It's a plausible scenario. Collecting ancient coins was popular among wealthy Europeans and Americans in the 1800s, and people do bury valuables. However, like the stones of Gungywamp, the simplicity of this explanation is challenged by the details. The composition of the hoard is peculiar for a typical collector's cache. While it contained coins spanning several centuries of Roman history, the vast majority dated from a specific later period, the 4th and 5th centuries AD, the twilight years of the Western Roman Empire, dominated by emperors ruling from the eastern capital of Constantinople, like Constantius II, Valentinian I, and Theodosius I. Crucially, many were low-value bronze minimissimi, tiny, crudely struck coins used for everyday small transactions in the late Empire. These are not the kind of impressive, high-value silver denarii or gold ore that typically attracted serious collectors. Why would a collector amass, carefully transport across the Atlantic, and then bury hundreds of these relatively common, low-value late Roman bronzes? It seems an odd choice compared to rarer, more visually striking coins from Rome's Golden Age. This anomaly fuels the far more controversial and tantalizing theory: pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. Could these coins have arrived in Connecticut before Christopher Columbus sailed in 1492? Proponents of this idea argue that the coins themselves, particularly the prevalence of those late Eastern Empire minimissimi, point to a different origin story. They suggest the coins could be physical evidence of fleeting visits to the North American coast by sailors from the Old World centuries, perhaps even a millennium before sustained European contact began. Who might these sailors have been? The late Roman date of the bulk of the coins coincides with a period of upheaval but also exploration. Could a storm-blown Roman merchant vessel, perhaps traveling established routes to Britain or even venturing towards Iceland, have been driven catastrophically off course, eventually reaching the shores of North America? Surviving crew members might have traded with local Native Americans, perhaps exchanging coins for food or safe passage, some coins eventually finding their way inland or being buried. Alternatively, could later explorers, perhaps from the Byzantine Empire, the direct successor to Rome in the East centuries later, have reached these shores? Even Norse voyages, known to have reached Newfoundland around 1000 AD, could potentially have carried earlier Roman coins as curiosities or trade goods, dispersing them further south over time through indigenous trade networks. The location adds another layer. Montville is inland, near the Thames River, which flows into Long Island Sound. While not directly on the coast, it's accessible via river. Finding coins inland could support the idea of trade or movement beyond a simple shipwreck site. If a collector buried them, why choose a spot not associated with any known 19th or 20th century homestead? The exact context of the find remains somewhat vague, adding to the difficulty of pinning down their history. Mainstream scholars counter that no other evidence supports pre-Columbian Roman or Byzantine presence in New England. No shipwrecks, no settlements, no Roman artifacts beyond these disputed coins. They argue the collector theory, while imperfect, is still more probable than rewriting transatlantic history based on a single, contextually weak hoard. The burden of proof, they stress, lies with the extraordinary claim. Yet the Montville coins persist as an unsettling anomaly. The sheer number, the specific type favoring late Eastern Empire small change, and the lack of a clear modern provenance create a nagging sense of doubt about the collector theory. Were they truly lost treasure from a 19th century immigrant's cabinet? Or are they silent, metallic witnesses to a forgotten voyage, a chance encounter lost in the mists of time? Did a Roman sailor, a Byzantine trader, or even a Norse explorer with a pouch of old coins truly set foot on the soil of Connecticut centuries before history says it was possible? The coins offer no easy answers, only faded imperial profiles staring mutely back from the Connecticut earth, challenging the conventional timeline and whispering of possibilities as vast and unexplored as the ocean itself. The mystery of how they got there remains buried as deep as the coins once were. Tucked away on the forested slopes of Furnace Mountain in Lakeville, Connecticut, lies a structure that refuses to be easily categorized. It's a sprawling complex of massive stone, not just scattered boulders, but arranged formations that whisper of deliberate hands shaping the landscape long ago. This is the Furnace Mountain Altar, sometimes called the Furnace Mountain Chamber. On the surface, it might blend into the rugged New England terrain, but look closer, and an unsettling question arises. Why is this here? Is it the pragmatic work of colonial quarrymen, or is it something far older, something echoing with lost rituals? The most common, practical explanation points to colonial industry. The Salisbury-Lakeville region was a major iron-producing hub in the 18th and 19th centuries. Furnaces dotted the landscape, demanding vast quantities of limestone flux to purify the molten iron. Could these stones simply be the remnants of an abandoned limestone quarry? Proponents of this theory highlight the proximity to known furnace sites and the practical need for the stone. They suggest the formations are merely the scars left by extraction, natural bedrock exposed by quarrying activity, perhaps partially shaped by blasting or splitting stone. It's a logical, grounded explanation, fitting neatly into the documented industrial history of the area. But step onto the site itself, and the quarry theory begins to feel incomplete, fragile even. What confronts you isn't just a chaotic jumble of broken rock. There are distinct, purposeful features. A massive flat stone table, roughly rectangular, dominates the central area, the namesake altar. Surrounding it are large, upright stones, some appearing like crude sentinels or forming partial walls. Most striking are the precise right angles and straight lines carved into several of the largest stones. These aren't the jagged fractures expected from blasting or natural weathering. They look deliberately pecked and shaped, forming clean edges and corners. One particularly imposing stone features a deep, straight groove running along its top surface, a feature with no obvious purpose in quarrying, but suggestive of channeling liquid or perhaps holding something in place. The sheer scale and arrangement feel intentional, almost monumental. Why would quarrymen expend such effort to create a central platform and arrange standing stones, especially in a location where simply breaking rock and hauling it away was the goal? Colonial quarries typically leave behind waste piles and extraction pits, not complex arrangements centered around a prominent flat stone. Furthermore, historical records from the colonial era itself add a layer of intrigue. Early settlers in the region documented encountering what they called Indian altars, or sacrifice stones, on Furnace Mountain. These weren't vague legends passed down centuries later. These were contemporary observations by people sharing the landscape, attributing these structures to the indigenous peoples they were displacing. Why would colonists invent such a designation for their own industrial workings? This leads us down the path of the far more enigmatic possibility, a pre-colonial, likely Native American, ceremonial site. The features align remarkably well with known indigenous ritual landscapes found elsewhere in the Northeast. The central table stone could have served as a platform for offerings, rituals, or important gatherings. The surrounding upright stones might have marked sacred space, created alignments for solar or lunar events, or represented spiritual entities. The precise shaping and the prominent groove could have held deep symbolic or practical ritual significance, now lost to time. The site's location, elevated on the mountain with views of the surrounding land, is also typical of places chosen for spiritual importance, places where earth and sky meet. So, who built it? The most likely candidates are ancestors of the Algonquian-speaking peoples who inhabited the region for millennia before European arrival, groups like the Mohicans or possibly earlier cultures. The style doesn't point to known transatlantic builders like the Norse or Celts. It resonates far more strongly with indigenous North American stonework traditions, though admittedly less common in heavily glaciated Connecticut than further north or south. The mystery deepens because of the ambiguity. It lacks the clear astronomical alignments of Gungwywamp's calendar chamber, making definitive ritual proof elusive. Yet it equally lacks the clear waste rock piles, tool marks, or transportation routes expected of a dedicated quarry. It sits stubbornly in the middle ground, defying easy explanation. Was it originally a sacred site later partially exploited by colonists for stone, explaining the damage and confusion? Or was it a quarry where the natural formations were so striking that colonists misinterpreted them as ancient altars? Or is it, as many who feel its peculiar energy believe, a genuine remnant of a spiritual landscape, its true purpose obscured by centuries and the profound cultural disruption that followed European contact. The stones of Furnace Mountain hold their silence, a massive, enigmatic puzzle hidden in plain sight, challenging us to see beyond the practical and consider the sacred imprinted on the very bones of the land. Along the shimmering coastline of what is now southeastern Connecticut, the Nehantic people were once a formidable presence. Known also as the Nehantic, they were a powerful Algonquian tribe, masters of the shore, skilled fishermen and traders navigating the waters of Long Island Sound. Their territory stretched from the Connecticut River eastward into Rhode Island, a vital presence in the coastal network. They interacted with early European traders, navigated the complex rivalries between colonists and other tribes, and had distinct leadership. And then, within a startlingly short span after European contact, they effectively vanished from history as a distinct, cohesive people. How does an entire tribe, documented and seemingly established, simply disappear without a clear historical trace? We know they were there. Early Dutch and English records mention them. They were significant enough to be drawn into the brutal conflicts of the era, notably the Pequot War in the 1630s. They initially allied with the English against the powerful Pequot, their traditional rivals. However, the shifting tides of power and land pressure soon turned allies into competitors. The Nehantics found themselves increasingly squeezed between the expanding English colonies and the rising power of the Mohegan tribe under the formidable sachem Uncas. Uncas, a shrewd and ambitious leader, saw the weakened Nehantics as an opportunity. Through a combination of political maneuvering, pressure, and outright aggression, Uncas and the Mohegans systematically absorbed Nehantic territory and people throughout the mid-17th century. This absorption is a key factor, but it doesn't feel like the whole story. While many Nehantics likely joined the Mohegans or other neighboring groups like the Narragansetts for survival, blending into those communities, the sheer speed and completeness of their disappearance as Nehantics is jarring. Other tribes suffered devastating losses but maintained a distinct identity, however diminished, the Pequots being a prime example. The Nehantics, however, seemed to dissolve. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, specific references to the Nehantic as a functioning tribe with their own leadership and territory virtually cease in colonial records. The invisible killer stalking all native communities during this period was undoubtedly disease. Epidemics introduced by Europeans, smallpox, measles, influenza, swept through indigenous populations with horrifying lethality, often killing 80–90% of communities. These diseases hit before Europeans even arrived in large numbers, traveling along trade routes. The densely populated coastal areas like Nehantic territory were likely hit earliest and hardest. A single epidemic could have decimated the Nehantic population, shattering their societal structure, killing elders and leaders who held cultural knowledge, and leaving survivors too weakened to resist political absorption or displacement. Archaeological evidence, like a suspected mass burial site, a plague pit, uncovered near Lyme, Connecticut, offers silent, grim testimony to this devastating reality. The combination was likely catastrophic, devastating epidemics crippling their population and social fabric, followed immediately by intense pressure from the Mohegans under Uncas eager to expand his influence, coupled with the relentless encroachment of English settlers claiming Nehantic lands. Survivors faced an impossible choice: assimilate into neighboring tribes, losing their distinct Nehantic identity in the process, disperse into small, isolated family groups trying to remain invisible, or move far away, perhaps joining communities in New York or points west. Without a critical mass of people on their ancestral land, without strong leadership to advocate for them in the colonial system, and with colonial authorities primarily dealing with larger groups like the Mohegans, the Nehantics simply faded from official view. Yet whispers of their presence lingered. Place names along the coast, Nehantic, endure as ghostly reminders. Occasional references in later records might mention an Indian from Nehantic or note individuals with Nehantic ancestry living within Mohegan communities. Folklore persists in the region about the vanished people who lived along the shore. There are stories, difficult to verify, of a small group of Nehantics clinging to existence near the mouth of the Nehantic River into the 19th century, perhaps just a few families, their language and traditions fading with each generation until they were simply gone. A poignant 1749 Connecticut census lists just 5 persons as Nehantic, a hauntingly small number marking the twilight of a nation. Their disappearance feels abrupt, almost unnervingly quiet compared to the violent ends of other tribes. There was no single documented massacre, no dramatic last stand. Instead, it seems they succumbed to a perfect storm of invisible biological warfare, aggressive neighbors, and the relentless tide of colonization. How does an entire people cease to exist as a distinct entity? The Nehantics stand as a stark, unsettling testament to the fragility of cultures in the face of overwhelming catastrophe. They were powerful, they were present, they had a name and a place. And then, within a few generations after the first European sails appeared on the horizon, they were effectively gone from the stage of history, leaving behind little more than silent shell middens, enduring place names, and a profound mystery echoing along the shores they once called home. Where did the last true Nehantic go? What final stories, songs, and knowledge vanished with them? The coastline holds its secrets close. High on a wooded hillside in Washington, Connecticut, perched with impossible delicacy, rests a site that defies common sense. This is Balanced Rock, a colossal glacial boulder estimated to weigh close to 100 tons. It doesn't just sit heavily on the earth. Instead, it balances precariously on a much smaller stone base, a geological giant seemingly frozen mid-tumble. The immediate scientific explanation is clear. Glaciers did this. During the last ice age, thousands of years ago, advancing ice sheets scraped and plucked this massive granite boulder from bedrock far to the north. As the glaciers retreated, they deposited their burdens erratically across the landscape. Balanced rock, according to this view, is simply a dramatic example of a glacial erratic, a monument to the raw, indifferent power of ice. And yet, standing before it, the sheer improbability of its position takes your breath away. The massive rock isn't just resting near the base stone, it's perched directly on top of a specific, relatively small point of contact. The contact point is surprisingly precise, looking almost engineered. The angles seem deliberate. It possesses an unnerving stability, having weathered centuries of New England storms without shifting. This isn't the chaotic jumble of rocks often left by retreating glaciers. It looks intentional. Too intentional. How could the random, crushing force of a melting glacier deposit one massive boulder onto a specific, much smaller stone with such improbable equilibrium? It feels less like a geological accident and more like a feat of impossible engineering. This nagging sense of improbability fuels a far more controversial and captivating question. Could human hands have been involved? Could ancient engineers, possessing knowledge or techniques lost to time, have somehow manipulated this titanic stone into its current, gravity-defying position? The idea seems ludicrous at first glance. Moving and precisely positioning a 100-ton rock with pre-industrial technology sounds like the stuff of myth. Mainstream geology dismisses it outright, pointing to the well-understood mechanics of glacial deposition and the lack of any tool marks or direct evidence of human modification on the rock itself. They argue that nature is perfectly capable of creating seemingly impossible formations through random processes given enough time. But proponents of the ancient engineer theory point to the rock's context and its uncanny resemblance to purposefully balanced stones found elsewhere in the world. The site itself feels charged. Balanced rock sits within a larger complex of other significant stone formations in the area, cairns, possible stone chambers, and other unusual arrangements. suggesting a landscape that might have held special significance long ago. While Balanced Rock is the most visually dramatic, its presence amidst other potential ritual or ceremonial markers is intriguing. Could it have been a focal point, a boundary marker imbued with spiritual power, or even an astronomical pointer? The theory suggests that the glacier brought the boulder close, perhaps depositing it nearby or even partially on the base stone, but that ancient people then recognized its potential. Using levers, counterweights, earthen ramps, and immense coordinated effort, techniques known to have been used for megalithic construction elsewhere, though on a slightly smaller scale, they might have painstakingly adjusted its position. The goal? To achieve that perfect, precarious balance. Why? The reasons are lost, but possibilities echo those of other enigmatic stone sites. As a symbol of harmony between earth and sky, a demonstration of power over the natural world, a sacred object representing the delicate balance of life, or even a practical astronomical alignment point, though definitive alignments here are less documented than at Gungywamp or Judd Altar. Local indigenous oral traditions, though fragmented by time and colonization, sometimes reference powerful stones and places of spirit within the landscape. While no specific Nehantic or Mohican legend definitively names Balanced Rock, the broader Algonquian worldview often imbued significant natural features with deep meaning. Could this astonishing natural formation have been recognized and ritually enhanced by the region's original inhabitants, transforming a glacial erratic into a sacred object? The lack of tool marks doesn't entirely negate this. Subtle adjustments, leveraging natural pivot points, might leave no trace we can easily recognize millennia later. The enigma of Balanced Rock lies in this profound tension between the plausible and the seemingly impossible. Geology provides a clear, evidence-based origin story, but the human eye and intuition struggle to accept that such delicate, awe-inspiring balance was purely accidental. Was it the patient hand of the glacier alone, a testament to nature's ability to create breathtaking coincidences? Or did ancient eyes see the potential in this glacial gift, and ancient hands, guided by purpose we can no longer fathom, coax it into its final, breathtaking pose? Balanced Rock stands silent, a 100-ton question mark etched in granite, perpetually poised between the forces of nature and the whispers of human ingenuity. It challenges us to look beyond the obvious, reminding us that sometimes the most profound mysteries are written not in words, but in stone and gravity. Deep within the woods of Bridgewater, Connecticut, hidden beneath a canopy of leaves, lies a stone structure that whispers of forgotten knowledge. This is the Judd Altar, also known as the Peters Rock Complex or simply the Bridgewater Dolmen. Unlike the subterranean chambers of Gungywamp or the imposing balance of Washington's erratic, the Judd Altar presents a different kind of puzzle, one of precise angles, deliberate alignments, and a sophistication that seems to transcend its probable origins. At its heart is a massive, flat capstone, estimated to weigh several tons, resting improbably upon 3 sturdy supporting stones. It looks like a crude table, or perhaps a doorway. But its true mystery lies not just in its form, but in how it interacts with the heavens above. The simplest explanation, once again, points to colonial practicality. Could this be the remains of a root cellar, a field-clearing pile, or even the foundation for a long-gone settler's structure? Proponents note that the surrounding area has colonial history. Perhaps the large capstone was intended for a mill or bridge, but was never used and left propped up. It's a functional, unromantic explanation. However, stepping into the presence of the Judd Altar shatters this mundane theory. The structure exhibits a level of precision that feels utterly out of place for a colonial discard pile or unused foundation. The 3 support stones are carefully chosen and positioned to create a remarkably stable platform for the massive capstone. But it's the angles and alignments that truly astound. Careful surveys have revealed that the sides of the capstone form precise right angles 90 degrees. Even more compellingly, the entire structure demonstrates clear astronomical orientations. The most significant alignment occurs during the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. As the sun rises in the southeastern sky on that pivotal morning, its first rays are channeled precisely through a narrow, deliberately formed groove or sightline created by the arrangement of the capstone and its supports. This beam of light strikes a specific point on a large boulder positioned nearby, known as the solstice stone or lighting stone. This isn't a vague alignment. It's a repeatable, observable phenomenon requiring careful planning and execution. Furthermore, alignments with the summer solstice sunrise and possibly even lunar standstills have also been suggested, painting a picture of a sophisticated celestial calendar carved in stone. This precision fuels the theory that the Judd altar is a pre-colonial, likely Native American, ritual site of significant importance. The structure bears a striking resemblance to dolmens found in Europe, ancient megalithic tombs or ceremonial structures consisting of a large capstone on uprights. While direct transatlantic connections are highly speculative and unlikely, the similarity in form and function, celestial observation, is undeniable. The complex surrounding the main altar, including stone rows, cairns, and other potential markers, suggests this wasn't an isolated monument, but part of a larger sacred landscape. The sacred geometry aspect deepens the mystery. The perfect right angles and the specific solstitial alignment imply a sophisticated understanding of geometry and astronomy. How did its builders achieve such precision without written records or complex instruments? Did they possess empirical knowledge passed down through generations of sky watching? Was the site used for marking the seasons crucial for planting, hunting, or ceremonial cycles? The alignment with the winter solstice, marking the sun's rebirth and the gradual return of light, holds profound spiritual significance in many cultures, suggesting the Judd altar was a place of renewal and cosmic connection. The question of who remains open. Like Gungywamp and Furnace Mountain, the most plausible builders are ancestors of the Algonquian peoples indigenous to the region. However, the Judd altar's unique dolmen-like form and its exceptional precision set it apart. It represents a level of stoneworking and astronomical knowledge that pushes the boundaries of what is typically attributed to pre-contact cultures in this specific area. Did a particularly skilled group or individual possess specialized knowledge? Was this site a unique focal point, perhaps drawing people from a wider area for solstice observations? Mainstream archaeology remains cautious, often citing the lack of definitive dating or associated artifacts directly linking the construction to pre-colonial times. The proximity to colonial activity keeps the colonial oddity theory alive, however strained it seems against the evidence of the alignments. Yet, the Judd altar persists as one of Connecticut's most compelling archaeoastronomical sites. The silent stones speak most eloquently at dawn on the winter solstice. When that beam of sunlight pierces the structure and illuminates the target stone with uncanny precision, the argument for accident fades away. It feels like witnessing the activation of an ancient machine, a deliberate conversation between earth and sky encoded in granite. Who were the architects of this celestial dialogue? What ceremonies unfolded beneath the capstone as the sun's light found its mark? The Judd altar offers no easy answers, only the enduring, precise language of stone and sunlight, a testament to a deep understanding of the cosmos that continues to resonate through the Connecticut woods, challenging our perception of the ancient past with every solstice sunrise. History books tell us where they rested. Colonial deeds and early settler accounts sometimes carefully noted their presence, often as boundaries or landmarks. These were the sacred resting places of the Pequot people, ancestors returned to the earth within the rolling hills and coastal plains of what is now southeastern Connecticut. These burial grounds were not hidden. They were known, documented features of the landscape for generations. And yet today, many of these explicitly recorded sites have seemingly vanished without a trace. How do entire cemeteries, places of profound cultural significance with documented locations, simply disappear from the physical world. The Pequot, a powerful Algonquian nation, had inhabited this region for centuries before European arrival. Like all cultures, they honored their dead with specific rites and designated burial areas. These grounds were more than just plots. They were sacred portals, places where the living maintained connection with the ancestors, integral to the spiritual and physical geography of their homeland. Early colonial records, particularly deeds and land transaction documents, occasionally reference these sites. A boundary might be described as from the Great Oak to the Indian burying place, or a plot of land noted as being adjacent to the ancient Indian graves. These weren't vague rumors. They were practical notations in legal papers, pinpointing real locations. Following the devastating Pequot War of 1637, which saw the near destruction of the tribe and the forced dispersal of survivors, the landscape underwent a violent transformation. Surviving Pequots were enslaved, absorbed into other tribes like the Mohegan and Narragansett, or confined to small, designated tracts. Their ancestral lands were rapidly claimed and divided by English settlers. This is where the documented burial grounds began their slow, unsettling fade from physical reality. The new landowners, driven by a mix of religious disdain for indigenous practices, superstitious fear, and sheer pragmatic desire for usable land, often deliberately obscured or destroyed these sites. The methods of disappearance were often chillingly mundane, yet profoundly effective. Plowing fields for agriculture could level mounds and scatter bones. Building foundations for homes, barns, or stone walls might be laid directly over graves, the stones themselves perhaps quarried from nearby burial markers. Development accelerated this erasure. Roads were laid, villages expanded, and later suburban sprawl paved over the past. In some cases, settlers actively removed visible grave markers, stones, wooden posts, or ceremonial objects, either discarding them, repurposing them as building material, or simply relocating them to clear the land. The earth itself seemed to swallow the evidence, aided by human hands. The most unsettling aspect is the contrast between the written record and the physical void. Researchers, historians, and Pequot descendants can point to specific parcels of land described in 17th and 18th century documents as containing burial grounds. Yet, arriving at those coordinates today, they often find nothing. No mounds, no distinctive stones, no sense of sacred space, just ordinary fields, forests, or backyards. Modern archaeological surveys sometimes struggle to locate even subsurface evidence, especially if the burials were not in deep pits, or if centuries of plowing and development have thoroughly disturbed the soil. It's as if the ground refused to hold the memory the paper insisted upon. The erasure wasn't always accidental malice. It was often systemic indifference. Colonial perspectives rarely valued indigenous sacred sites. Burial grounds were obstacles to progress, relics of a vanished people, even as Pequot survivors and descendants persisted, or simply unclaimed real estate. There was no effort to preserve, document with care, or mark these locations respectfully within the new colonial framework. The knowledge held by the Pequot themselves about specific sites was fragmented by war, displacement, and the suppression of their culture, making oral tradition an incomplete map to counter the physical destruction. Yet the land holds whispers. Occasionally, during construction projects, gardening, or erosion, human remains or grave goods surface unexpectedly, silent, jarring confirmations of the document's truth. These discoveries are often met with shock by modern residents and prompt difficult questions about the ground beneath their feet. For the Mashantucket Pequot tribal nation, who fought for and regained a portion of their homeland, the search for and reverence of ancestral burials is an ongoing act of cultural reclamation and healing. They actively research the old deeds, collaborate with archaeologists using non-invasive techniques like ground-penetrating radar, and work to identify and protect any sites that can still be located. The mystery of the vanished burial grounds is less about supernatural disappearance and more about the quiet violence of colonization and neglect. It's a testament to how effectively a dominant culture can physically erase the sacred geography of another. How many documented resting places lie undisturbed beneath manicured lawns or paved streets, known only to brittle paper and the enduring memory of the Pequot people. The disappearance forces us to confront the fragility of history when respect is absent, and to wonder what other sacred truths the Connecticut soil holds, silently, just beneath the surface. Where did the ancestors go, not in spirit, but in stone and bone? The answer is often heartbreakingly close, yet buried deep beneath layers of time and disregard. Carved into the dark, wave-washed surfaces of coastal outcrops along the Lieutenant River in Old Lyme, Connecticut, lies a gallery of ancient art that shouldn't exist. These are the Old Lyme Petroglyphs, intricate designs pecked into the hard metamorphic rock centuries, possibly millennia ago. While Native American petroglyphs are found elsewhere in the Northeast, the Old Lyme carvings present a profound paradox. Their style, their complexity, and their very isolation make them utterly unique in the region. Why do these specific rocks bear markings found nowhere else nearby, echoing traditions from distant shores instead? Petroglyphs, images carved into rock, are a global phenomenon, a universal human language etched in stone. In New England, known indigenous petroglyph sites like those at Machias Bay in Maine or along Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire often share common themes. You find representations of the natural world crucial to life: canoes, fish, turtles, birds, human figures, and powerful spiritual symbols like the thunderbird or serpents. The styles tend to be somewhat similar within cultural areas, reflecting shared beliefs and artistic conventions among Algonquian-speaking peoples. The Old Lyme petroglyphs, however, stand apart. While some familiar elements appear, like a possible canoe or abstract lines, many designs are strikingly different. There are intricate geometric patterns, concentric circles, spirals, complex lattices, and interconnected lines forming webs or grids. Some figures are highly stylized and abstract, lacking the clear representational form common at other regional sites. The most famous panel features a large, complex design often described as resembling a sunburst or radiant figure, with lines emanating from a central point, surrounded by circles and interconnected grooves. This level of geometric complexity and abstraction is rare for confirmed Algonquian sites in southern New England. This uniqueness creates the core paradox. If these were carved by the local Nehantic or Mohegan peoples, whose territories included Old Lyme, why don't their styles match other verified examples of their work nearby or further afield? Why is this concentration of such distinct petroglyphs found only here, on these specific riverside ledges? It feels like an artistic anomaly, a pocket of expression disconnected from the regional norm. One theory points to extreme antiquity. Could these carvings predate the Algonquian cultures we know, created by much earlier, perhaps archaic period inhabitants of the region thousands of years ago? These earlier peoples might have possessed different artistic traditions and symbolic languages later replaced or absorbed. The abstract, geometric styles at Old Lyme do bear some resemblance to petroglyphs found in other parts of North America believed to be very old. However, dating petroglyphs is notoriously difficult. Without organic material embedded in the carving or clear association with datable artifacts, pinning down their age remains elusive. The constant exposure to tides, ice, and weathering also obscures potential clues. The most controversial theory, fueled by the carving's coastal location, suggests possible transatlantic influence. The intricate spirals, concentric circles, and web-like patterns at Old Lyme bear an uncanny visual resemblance to petroglyph styles found in parts of Atlantic Europe, notably Ireland, Portugal, and northern Spain, dating from the Neolithic and Bronze Age. Could these similarities be pure coincidence, a case of independent artistic development across vast distances and time? Or could they hint at the faintest possibility of pre-Columbian contact, where voyagers from across the ocean left their mark on the Connecticut shore? Proponents of this idea point to the navigational feasibility of following currents and note the concentration of unusual stone structures elsewhere in the state. Mainstream archaeology, however, heavily emphasizes the lack of any corroborating evidence. No European artifacts, no shipwrecks, no cultural diffusion in other aspects of life, making direct influence highly improbable. A third possibility focuses on local innovation and specific ritual purpose. Perhaps this particular site held unique, profound significance for the local indigenous groups, warranting a distinct, specialized artistic language. The location, directly on the tidal Lieutenant River estuary, is significant. It's a liminal space where fresh water meets salt, land meets water, and the tangible world might meet the spirit world. Such places were often considered powerful portals. The geometric designs, unlike representational images of animals or people, might have represented cosmic concepts, spiritual energies, maps of the underworld, or complex mythological narratives known only to specific shamans or ritual specialists. The act of carving itself, in such a dynamic, challenging environment constantly washed by tides, could have been a powerful ritual act imbuing the symbols with greater potency. The very isolation of the style might reflect its sacred, restricted nature. The Old Lyme Petroglyphs remain an enigma carved in stone. Their paradox, unique styles in a localized coastal setting, defies easy categorization. Were they the work of ancient, forgotten local artists expressing a unique vision, sacred symbols from a specialized ritual tradition lost to time, or merely an intriguing example of how similar human minds can create similar abstract patterns across vast divides? As the tides continue to wash over them, slowly eroding their edges, the carvings persist, silent witnesses to artistic language we can see but not fully decipher. They challenge our assumptions about regional uniformity and whisper of deeper, more complex stories woven into the bedrock of the Connecticut shore, stories washed by time but still visible, if only we can learn to read their mysterious, water-worn code. Why here? Why like this? The stones hold the patterns, but the meaning remains adrift, like a boat lost on the ancient tide. Scattered across the landscape of Guilford, Connecticut, often half buried in fields or nestled beside old stone walls, lie rocks that look distinctly unnatural. These are the cup and saucer stones, and their appearance is as peculiar as their name suggests. Imagine a large, rounded boulder, typically dark volcanic rock like basalt or similar hard stone. Embedded firmly into its top surface is not one, but often multiple, perfectly cylindrical holes. These holes aren't rough or shallow. They plunge deep into the stone, several inches down, with smooth, vertical sides and flat bottoms, resembling, well, cups. Sometimes, surrounding these central cups, is a shallow, saucer-like depression carved into the rock's surface. The overall effect is strangely artificial, as if crafted by some unknown hand for a purpose lost to time. What were these enigmatic stones truly for? The most common, practical explanation points squarely to colonial industry. Guilford, like much of New England, was settled by farmers and craftsmen who needed tools. Hard volcanic rock was ideal material for grinding grain, crushing apples for cider, or pulverizing minerals. Could the cups be mortars? The theory suggests that colonists, seeking efficient grinding tools, identified suitable boulders already in place. Using metal drills, perhaps initially heated or combined with sand and water for abrasion, or persistent pecking with stone tools, they laboriously carved these deep, cylindrical holes. The surrounding saucer depression might simply be wear from the grinding action itself as a pestle was rotated, or perhaps it was intentionally carved to catch spillage. Proponents point to the sheer number of these stones found near known colonial homesteads and the practical need for such implements. It's a functional, grounded theory. But step closer, examine the stones and doubts begin to surface. The precision and depth of the cups often seem excessive for simple grinding. Many are drilled with an astonishingly uniform diameter and verticality, requiring significant time and effort that seems disproportionate if the goal was merely a functional mortar, especially when smaller, portable stone mortars were readily available and used. Furthermore, why drill multiple deep cups into a single boulder? Wouldn't one large mortar suffice? The saucer depressions, while sometimes showing wear, often appear too shallow and wide to be solely explained by pestle rotation. Crucially, many of these stones are found in locations that seem inconvenient for colonial work, not near cellar holes or barns, but in outlying fields or woods, sometimes even partially buried. If they were essential tools, why weren't they positioned closer to dwellings or workspaces? This disconnect fuels the more enigmatic possibility: a pre-colonial, likely Native American ritual purpose. The unique form, the deep, isolated cup within a shallow basin, doesn't have a clear parallel in known colonial utilitarian objects, but it does resonate with certain indigenous ceremonial practices documented elsewhere in North America. Similar cupule stones are found on other continents, often associated with sacred sites. What could their purpose have been? Theories abound, tinged with the mystery of lost traditions. One compelling idea is that they served as lamp stones, filled with animal fat or oil. With a moss or fiber wick placed in the deep cup, the surrounding saucer could catch dripping fuel. Such lamps could have illuminated nighttime ceremonies or marked sacred spaces. The deep cup would protect the flame from wind. Another theory suggests they were used for ritual offerings. The cup could hold small, significant items, sacred herbs, tobacco, cornmeal, or even symbolic liquids like blood or water, as offerings to spirits, ancestors, or deities. The saucer might collect rainwater, blending the offering with the heavens, or simply delineate the sacred space on the stone. A third possibility points to their use in pigment preparation. Crushing minerals like ochre within the cup, mixed with water or binding agents held in the saucer, could create paints used for body art, ceremonial objects, or pictographs. The location away from settlements might then signify a special ritual preparation area. The most intriguing and controversial aspect is the presence of stones with multiple cups. In a utilitarian colonial context, this makes little sense, but in a ritual context, multiple cups could represent different spirits, clans, celestial bodies, or stages in a ceremony. Some stones even show faint, possible carved lines connecting the cups, adding to the sense of symbolic arrangement. Could these be maps of constellations, representations of spirit journeys, or clan symbols? The mystery persists because the stones offer no definitive clues. They lack associated artifacts datable to either colonial or pre-colonial times. Tool marks are often obscured by weathering. The colonial theory struggles with the stones' locations, the effort involved for multiple cups, and the unique cup and saucer form that doesn't perfectly match known colonial grinding stones. The ritual theory, while evocative, lacks direct ethnographic evidence linking the specific form to known Connecticut Algonquian practices. Were they practical tools repurposed by colonists from much older indigenous ritual stones? Or are they purely colonial creations whose specific use we've simply forgotten? The cup and saucer stones sit silently in the Guilford landscape, their smooth, deep holes staring skyward like unblinking eyes. Were they workhorses of the colonial farm, or sacred vessels connecting the people to the spirit world? Each stone is a riddle carved in volcanic rock, a testament to a purpose that remains frustratingly, fascinatingly, just out of reach. The Shepaug River winds through the scenic Litchfield Hills of western Connecticut, a ribbon of life in a landscape of rolling forests and fertile valleys. By all conventional archaeological understanding, this should be prime real estate for ancient peoples. The river offers abundant fresh water, fish, and transportation routes. The surrounding hills provide game, shelter, and defensive positions. The valleys boast rich soil suitable for later horticulture. Compared to the well-documented indigenous activity along Connecticut's major rivers like the Connecticut or Housatonic, or its densely populated coast, the Shepog corridor presents a puzzling anomaly, a profound, echoing silence. Where are the villages? Where are the major campsites? Why does this seemingly ideal valley show such sparse evidence of sustained ancient habitation? It's a mystery of absence. Archaeologists surveying the Shepog Valley have indeed found evidence of human presence, but it's fleeting, scattered. Isolated projectile points, arrowheads or spear points, surface in fields, hinting at hunting parties passing through. A few small, temporary campfire sites might be uncovered, suggesting brief seasonal use. But the dense concentrations of artifacts, the deep shell middens, refuse piles indicating long-term settlement. The remains of semi-permanent longhouses or palisaded villages that characterize other major river valleys in the region. These are conspicuously absent along the Shepog. It's as if people visited, hunted, fished, but consistently chose not to put down roots for long periods. Why avoid such an apparently hospitable place? Environmental factors offer some plausible explanations. The Shepog Valley, while fertile in pockets, is narrower and steeper than the broad floodplains of the Connecticut River. This made it significantly more prone to devastating floods. A village established too close to the riverbanks could be wiped out in a single catastrophic storm. Repeated flooding could also rapidly strip away topsoil essential for any form of agriculture, making sustained settlement risky. Additionally, the soil composition in parts of the valley might have been less ideal for the types of crops, like maize, beans, and squash, that supported larger, more sedentary villages elsewhere, especially before sophisticated soil management techniques. The valley might have been seen as a rich resource area for hunting, fishing, and gathering specific materials, but the environmental instability made it unsuitable for establishing large, permanent communities. However, the environmental explanation feels incomplete. Other challenging areas were settled. This leads to the more intriguing possibility, cultural or spiritual reasons. For the ancestors of the Algonquian peoples inhabiting this region, likely groups ancestral to the Tunxis or Putatuk, the landscape wasn't just a collection of resources. It was imbued with deep spiritual meaning. Certain places could be considered powerful, sacred, or conversely, dangerous and taboo. Could the Shepog Valley, or specific powerful locations within it, have held such significance that it was deliberately avoided for permanent settlement? Perhaps it was seen as a spirit pathway, a domain of powerful entities best respected from a distance, or a boundary zone between different groups. Oral traditions, largely lost due to colonization, might have held specific warnings or prescriptions about this valley. Establishing a village in such a spiritually charged space could have been considered inviting misfortune or offending the spirits of the land. The valley might have been used for vision quests, specific rituals, or as a neutral hunting ground, but building homes there was forbidden. Another factor could be strategic vulnerability. While the hills offered defense, the relatively narrow valley might have been perceived as a potential trap, difficult to defend against raids from rival groups compared to more open areas or locations with more defensible promontories. If the valley was a contested boundary zone between larger tribal territories, like the Mohican to the north and west and coastal groups to the south, it might have been intentionally left as a buffer, a no-man's land, where no group established a permanent claim to avoid conflict. People used it, but didn't own it in the same settled way. The silence of the Shepog is amplified by the richness found elsewhere. Why build substantial villages on the exposed coast vulnerable to storms, or in other narrow valleys, but not here? The scarcity of findings also makes archaeological work challenging. It's harder to locate the subtle traces of transient use compared to the obvious remains of a village. Perhaps future surveys, using advanced techniques like LIDAR light detection and ranging to peer beneath the forest canopy, will reveal more small sites or patterns of use we've missed. Maybe a major site lies undiscovered, buried under centuries of sediment or later development. But for now, the pattern holds. The Shepog River's mystery is one of emptiness. It's the question of why a place that looks so inviting on the map and to our modern eyes might have been deliberately shunned or only lightly touched by ancient peoples. Was it the ever-present threat of the river's destructive power? Was it a landscape whispering of spirits best left undisturbed? Or was it simply caught between the territories of others, a beautiful corridor used but never truly claimed? As the river continues its timeless flow through the quiet hills, it offers no easy answers. Its banks hold fewer stories in stone and bone than its neighbors, making the silence itself the most compelling clue. What ancient voices decided this valley, so full of life, was not a place for their own? The Shepog keeps its secrets close, a reminder that the past isn't always written in grand ruins, but sometimes in the quiet spaces left deliberately, mysteriously empty. The past is filled with mysteries, some carved into stone, some hidden deep within the forests of Connecticut, and others waiting in plain sight for those who know where to look. The stories we've explored today are just a glimpse into the strange, the unexplained, and the forgotten pieces of history that continue to puzzle experts and ignite endless debate. But the more we uncover, the more questions remain.